Hello and welcome to episode 31 of our podcast, Smart Consulting Sourcing, the podcast about consulting procurement. My name is Hélène and I'll be your host today. Each week, I'll give you the keys to better use, manage, and source consulting services. This week, I'll discuss why should finance and strategy get involved in decision-making on large consulting projects. Last week, I explained how to draft the right consulting agreement. We saw what to include in a robust consulting agreement template, because agreements are an excellent way to make sure that your expectations are understood and a reference to build your case if the project goes awry. So launching a large consulting project can be daunting, and often the project will have an impact on several functions and locations. You're already looking at the potential challenges, how to make sure the project will deliver, how to embark our teams on the journey, and so forth. But before you start brainstorming on your ideal outcome, let's make sure that the right people are in the room. So we saw in a previous podcast who does what in the consulting process. And we know that we will need a project sponsor. The project sponsor is the person accountable for the project. And they will make sure that the project delivers the expected outcomes, and they will champion the project to sell it within the project team and the organization. We also need a project manager, who's the person who has the daily accountability for the project. We have the procurement manager in the room to make sure the process follows company policies and procurement best practices. And then we have the main stakeholders to make sure they embrace the project. And that's the case for any consulting project launched in your company. But the large project is then another animal. It's often a strategic project. And if it's not, why are you launching it exactly? And even though strategy is not always an explicit stakeholder, the group is responsible for designing executive corporate goals. So if your project is large and strategic, it has a good chance to be a key piece of the action plan to make this strategy happen. But they will potentially be your ally in evaluating the strategic value of the project, and they might also have ideas in how to scope the project. And in the same way, finance is interested firsthand by how the consulting project is spent. And if the project is large, you will have to convince them at some point in time that your project is indeed strategic and worthy of the investment. So why not anticipate the objections and involve them early on? You will gain the support and probably shorten the decision-making process. But what's a large project likely? You're not going to like the answer because it depends. And the definition is linked to the size of your company and the extent of your consulting spend. In other words, an SME could have almost all consulting projects falling into that category, when a large Fortune 1000 company would have a threshold of around $250,000. That's it. I launched the keyword threshold because it has a very special place in my consulting sourcing bingo card, right next to demand management. The best way to determine your threshold is to have a look at your consulting spend profile. And if you rank all projects from the last 2 years, from the most expensive to the least expensive, where do you draw the line representing 80% of your project, right? And now draw a second line representing 20% of the project, starting still with the most expensive. And these two lines, they determine, the range where the threshold will be. So it should be between those two lines. To choose the right threshold now, you need to take into account several elements, such as the degree of centralization for procurement, strategy, and finance, the workload any given threshold will represent for these functions, and the flexibility your business line will need to operate properly. So now you have a threshold. So what's next? Unfortunately, there's no one-fits-all organization that will magically get you all the benefits in one step. So depending on the volume of project you handle every year, the level of centralization, or the strategic evolution that you expect for the years to come, you will have different options that could work. So first option, you can have a small key committee to validate large projects. So the decision to move on for strategic project or project above a certain threshold can be validated through a small committee made with procurement, strategy, and finance. And project afterward will be sourced and managed directly by operational teams. So, of course, this solution is simple and is consistent with strategy, and it keeps users reasonable. But the downside is that you have potentially a huge volume under management. Another option is to implement multifunctional teams. So let's imagine that you think that managing consulting is strategic and you have a volume of project that is sufficient, but not enough to justify a dedicated procurement team, right? In that case, you can consider building multifunctional teams to review projects over a certain threshold with always the core triumvirate made of procurement, strategy, and finance. And with this option, you will have more control over how projects are assessed and led. But it also requires very clear processes and excellent collaboration between the different functions. So this is a great option because it's still flexible and it can adapt to the specific needs of a project. But there's still a problem, which is the complexity of the organization in case of large volumes. The last option, you implement a strategic committee. For companies with a large consulting spend, the best option is probably to assemble a team dedicated to consulting and to integrate governance to decide on key projects. So the procurement professional will ensure all projects are assessed and that they involve the right players in the process. They will also bring the more strategic project to the committee that will have representative of the major functions. And the centralization of the decisions will allow you to focus your energy and resources on the most impactful project. So the good news is that solution is still flexible and it's aligned with strategy. The downside is that a lower degree of decentralization can be a challenge for some companies, and it requires enough critical mass to justify the costs. So independent on whether you implement strict demand management or just filter projects based on the cost, you need to look closely at the most expensive projects to ensure that they are strategic and timely. And for that purpose, you will need to have strategy and finance involved in the decision. And embarking them early in the process will help you keep the deadlines and smooth the validation. So that's it for today. Next time I'll explain how to anticipate your consulting needs to start building relationships and intimacy with your providers. In the meantime, if you have any questions or want to learn more about what we do at Consulting Quest, just send me an email at hélène.laffitte with 2 F and 2 T's at consultingquest.com. You can also have a look at our website, smartconsultingsourcing.com, to know more about our book and download free templates and guides to improve your consulting sourcing. Bye and see you next week. Au revoir.